We also know that you are a trustee of the Dhamma Center UK. Over to you, Don.
Thank you so much, Emeritus Professor Senanayake, Most Venerable Jnanasihatero, Venerable Bhikkhus, Venerable Bhikkhunis, and attendees. I'm now going to share screen. Thank you so much. I am really honored to make this presentation to the servants of the Buddha. I learned from the logo of the servants of the Buddha, which is Araha Hesami, which means may I attain Arahathood. This is an organization which was founded way back in 1921. It is most likely one of the oldest Buddhist civic organizations, not only in Sri Lanka, but also in the world. But I am very interested in the mission of this organization, which is the study, practice, and dissemination of teachings, taking great care not to stray from the authentic word of the Supreme Buddha. And this is something which I am firmly dedicated and committed to, because I find that some current discourses appear to be straying away from the word of the Buddha. And my interest is in trying to see what exactly the Buddha said and did on many issues. The Buddhist texts not only deal with the core principles of Buddhism, they have rich information about the way the Buddha, his disciples, women and men, dealt with the key social, political, and economic issues of the day, which are extremely relevant for now. For example, corruption, religious strife, terrorism, fake news, good governance, accountability, leadership, racism, caste, equity, liberation of women, protecting the environment, and so on. And the word sutta, which is in Pali, Sanskrit sutra, is generally regarded as a discourse or by the Buddha or his contemporary disciples. Sutta means also to sew or to thread together. This is similar to the English word suture, which comes from Latin suture. Suture in medical parlance, as many of you I'm sure know, means a process of holding body tissues together after an injury or surgical procedure. So very simply, in my presentations, my purpose really is to thread together discourses about what the Buddha said and did about sustainability. And fake news or good speech is part and parcel of that process. So today we will be going through a background look at the world social media challenges, what the Buddha mean by fake speech and misinformation, the context of fake speech and speech in Buddhism, obligations to counter fake speech, use of fake speech during the time of the Buddha among the rulers, the aristocrats, spiritual leaders, how the Buddha countered fake speech, and the relevance, above all, of the Buddha's teachings to the present world, to the here and the now. So today's social media, as Professor Senanayake said, dominates a person's information sources. Very clearly, the benefits of social media are many. It provides you with powerful tools of communication in your hands. Social media enables me to communicate with large networks of Buddhists across the world and those interested in Buddhism. I interact with Vietnamese, Mongolians, Native Americans, to Africans in many parts of the world, in many parts of Africa, and to people in Alaska inquiring about the Dhamma. I think one of the best examples of the use of social media that I have so far experienced is the recent initiative undertaken by the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies under the leadership of Venerable Professor Makrupe Dhammananda. I heard about this course when this poster was distributed in a WhatsApp group of the Pali class, a very effective set of classes led by James Wellen, which I'm attending. Each of the 5 sessions was attended by an average of some 424 participants from many parts of the world. And Professor Galmangoda opened new vistas on Buddhist counseling. The entire coordination was undertaken through WhatsApp and Facebook. So fake news is nothing new. Fake speech is nothing new. It was used at length by rulers and spiritual leaders and still continue to do so, as we will see as we go on. During the 1st century BC, Octavian ran a campaign of misinformation against Mark Antony, portraying him as a drunkard and a puppet of the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. Social media can have also a debilitating impact on democracy because information can be provided and spread within a nanosecond. Fake news, often which is presented as misleading news, can motivate people, and it has the power to do so, as was demonstrated in the Washington Capitol riots, which took place in early January 2021. And these were some of the results. In the UK, there were quite a number of posts concerning Dr. Chris Whitty as he advocated conditions concerning interactions during the time when COVID was virulent. And here he is attacked by a mob. Also, social media can also motivate, for instance, debilitating results. Here is the case of a paramedic who was pushed over the edge after being shamed in Facebook for littering whilst in uniform. Her actions were somehow or the other somewhere filmed, and it was then put on social media. Fake news also has been present in my line of work in the environmental movement. And I have had, as a person working with the United Nations Environment Program, Ben, long time ago, before the internet came into being, also deal with fake speech and fake news. There were perceptions amongst some, for instance, religious leaders at the time in the world, that the environmental cause would, or the environmental ecological principles would be, for instance, going against the scripture texts which highlight man's dominion over the resources of this planet. And so today, again, fake news also is spread in some quarters concerning climate change issues. Owen Gaffney from the Stockholm Resilience Center says, social media reports have created a toxic environment where it is now very difficult to distinguish fact from fiction. Then you have also got President Obama, who has spoken at length about this matter. And he has said, if we are not serious about facts and what is true and what's not, if we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems. And he points out that fake news, active misinformation is also packaged very well so that it looks the same as real news. And then when asked about the concerns about social media, he says, I think it is the single biggest threat to our democracy. Within this context, I am extremely concerned that there is also fake information, news, speech spread concerning the statements made by the Buddha. This is an interesting example which I've come across, which is also highlighted in this website, fakebuddhaquotes.com, which is dedicated to countering fake news, information, and speech in Buddhism. Here is a tweet by a person where the person disseminates, when the words are both true and kind, they change our world. And that is attributed to the Buddha. Then it gets in different social media platforms, it gets changed, as you can see. And this was one that was challenged, but the real quote is this. In the long discourses, part of Buddha's advice to Sigala, the friend who is all take, the friend of empty words, the friend full of flattery, and the reckless friend. These four are not friends, but enemies. The wise understand this and keep them at a distance as they would a dangerous path. I am concerned that fake Buddha quotes are not only distributed by non-Buddhists, but it appears to be distributed by Buddhists themselves. And I see some of these posters distributed also by some monks in the social media. The Buddha also operated within sometimes a toxic environment. And during the time of the Buddha, the political landscape was under rapid change because you had monarchies led by ambitious kings who rose to embark on ferocious military campaigns with the purpose of expanding their domains. Oops. And this is the young Siddhartha Gautama, where the Buddha recalls the time when he was young and the environment at the time. He says, at that time, fear has arisen from one who has taken up violence. Behold the people engaged in strife. I will tell you of my sense of urgency, how I was stirred by a sense of urgency. Having seen people trembling like fish in a brook with little water, when I saw them hostile to one another, fear came over me. The world was insubstantial all around. All the directions were in turmoil. Desiring an abode for myself, I did not see any place unoccupied. This was the environment during his younger days. So, what exactly is right speech? And the Buddha gives this definition in Connected Discourses: abstinence from false speech, abstinence from divisive speech, abstinence from harsh speech, abstinence from idle chatter. This is called right speech. It is pretty clear. I just like to point out here that I am presenting just a snapshot of the Buddha's discourses on speech, on how to teach, and so on. The literature, to be honest, is quite vast, but I'm giving you some snippets to point you to this particular important topic for the world today, because I find that in the words of the Buddha, the processes, the issues are quite dynamic and relevant. So, in the case of speech, right speech, let's have a look at the context in which this is set, the framework. Right speech is in more or less in many of the lists given by the Buddha. We have this in the 5 precepts. I undertake the precept to abstain from false speech, as it was chanted at the beginning of this session. Then you have the Noble Eightfold Path, which refers to right speech. I do have a little bit of a problem when Samma Vacha is translated, or when Samma is translated as right, because I tend to think that Samma is more a comprehensive and a holistic process rather than simply right or wrong. And I regard this as more a comprehensive, holistic, interconnected process rather than simply the explaining it as simply right or wrong. Keeping that aside, the Buddha goes on to talk about the interconnectedness of speech. And going through the Eightfold Path, you see him dealing with wrong intention. For one of wrong intention, wrong speech springs up. For one of wrong speech, wrong action springs up. So it's an interconnected process. And then conversely, for one of right intention, right speech springs up. For one of right speech, right actions springs up. And this is an interesting set of sayings where I have put together from my experiences so far in dealing with young people and students and lecturers at university. And I have put together a set of statements that I've had to help with individuals, where these statements that they have heard from parents, from teachers, from peers, from workplace, that have gotten embedded in their own psyche, and that keeps playing over and over again in their minds. And let's go through them. There is no other way when a person makes a proposal. You will never change. There is nothing we can do, is often said in despair. Why can't you see it? Often in arguments. And this is another downer in discussions. Everybody knows, I don't have the time. You don't have a choice. And this is the one which is said often by bosses when younger ones tend to, in companies, make new proposals or suggest new ideas. Don't reinvent the wheel. And here is some really interesting parental advice by the Buddha to his son Rahula. Whenever you want to perform a verbal act, would it lead to self-affliction, the affliction of others, or to both? Whilst you are performing this, would it lead to self-affliction, the affliction of others, or to both? Having performed a verbal act, you should reflect on it. If on reflection, you know that it led to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both, it was an unskillful verbal act with painful consequences, painful results, then you should confess it. I think this particular statement ought to be put up in every household in our parts of the world. And with the case of the Buddha, So fake speech as it is now was rampant also with the rulers and the aristocracy at the time of the Buddha. Rumor mongering was a favorite pastime. And the Buddha was not immune to this, particularly from other spiritual sects or schools. This is a very interesting discourse with General Siha, a powerful general who went to see the Buddha. And before he went to see the Buddha, he checked his actions with Nathaputta, a spiritual leader. And then Nathaputta raised some concerns about the Buddha, particularly that he advocated non-doing. So the general went to the Buddha and in the discourse brought this up. I have heard this, Bhante, that you go around advocating non-doing and guiding your disciples in this manner. What do you say to this? So the Buddha said in his response, and this is a very interesting way of refuting allegations. You can't do this with every single allegation, but this is a very interesting form of throwing back allegations against you. He then says, I assert non-doing. Look at this way of dealing with this problem in a very diplomatic way. I assert non-doing of the numerous kinds of bad, unwholesome deeds. And he goes on, there are about 8 to 9 rumors that he deals with. I'm not going to go through all of them because of time, but I'm going to take 1 or 2 others. Then he was accused of being a proponent of deeds. The Buddha says, for I assert good bodily, verbal, and mental conduct. I assert the doing of numerous kinds of wholesome deeds. The Buddha was then accused of being an annihilationist. Rumors were spreading around to that effect. Then he says, I assert the annihilation of the numerous kinds of bad, unwholesome qualities. He was accused, word got around that he was a repeller. And he counters by saying, for I am repelled by bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct. I am repelled by the acquisition of the numerous kinds of bad, unwholesome qualities. So the discussion goes on, but please check this sutta up because it is quite relevant to what is happening in the world today. And the general then accepts the explanation and the teachings of the Buddha and decides to join the Sangha. But, and this is quite interesting in terms of the process with which the Buddha has worked. He says, make an investigation, siha. It is good for such well-known people like yourself to make an investigation first before rushing into joining the Sangha. And I think this is one of the most critical examples for our world today, thinking beyond faith. And the Buddha advises this very senior, powerful general who has been supporting other spiritual traditions for some time. Siha, your family has long been a fountain of support for the Niganthas. Hence, you should consider continuing to give alms to them when they approach you. Hence, you should consider continuing to give alms to them when they approach you. An unprecedented statement in the history of faith in the world, where a spiritual leader takes into account the concerns of the others. Also, the Buddha talks about those who, Then the Buddha goes on to deal with debates. How do you debate? Not crushing your opponent and also timing your response. Debates and discussions were very much part of the South Asian spiritual culture. And during the time of the Buddha in particular, rulers set aside parks and open spaces for wandering ascetics to dwell and discuss their views. This is not that very different in some places in the world today. We have a speaker's corner in London where such debates take place in the open, out in the open in parks. And so there were places, for instance, like Savat, the deer park at Saranath, where discussions and discourses took place. And this is, of course, as far as the pic is concerned, a shot of an ancient hall that you see in this slide. The Buddha tried hard to avoid fruitless debates, which were conducted for the purpose of humiliating others and promoting one's own fame. But as monks wandered the towns, they would invariably be drawn into debated and discussions with Brahmins, philosophers, ascetics of opposing views, and so on. So he took a lot of time to train the Sangha amongst his leadership in how to speak, how to discuss. Those who speak with quarrelsome intent, settled in their opinions, swollen with pride, ignoble having assailed virtues, look for openings to attack one another. They mutually delight when their opponent speaks badly and makes a mistake in his bewilderment and defeat. But noble ones don't engage in such talks. Take a look at some of the parliaments of the world to see this unfolding. If a wise person wants to talk, having known the time is right, without quarrelsome or pride, the sagely person should utter the speech that the noble ones practice, which is connected with the Dhamma and meaning. Not being insolent or aggressive, with a mind elated, he speaks from envy on the basis of right knowledge. He should approve of what is well expressed, but should not attack what is badly stated. He should not train in fault finding, nor seize on another's mistakes. He should not overwhelm and crush his opponent, nor speak mendacious words. And I now would like to point your kind attention to Dhammadena, who, according to the Buddha, was foremost in speaking about the Dhamma. The Buddha, from time to time, conducted skill studies. Today, in management speak, this would be skills audits. And among the Bhikkhuni Sangha at the time, the Buddha highlighted foremost female disciples, the foremost among my nun disciples in the Chattavagga and the Panchamavagga. And he lists these individuals whom he highlighted as bringing added value. And for instance, going down the list, Mahaprajapati Gautami, but coming down to speaking, foremost in speaking the Dhamma was Dhammadena. And this is an interesting case study. The Buddha was staying at Rajagaha in the squirrel sanctuary. Then Visakha, the lay follower, who was the husband of Dhammadena, the nun, went to check up on her to see how she fared in her understanding of the Dhamma. And then he questioned her in detail about the Dhamma. And then Dhammadinna, after this very long grilling, urged Visakha to then also check what has been said with the Buddha. Then Visakha, rejoicing in what Dhammadinna, the nun, had said, bowed down to her and keeping her to his right, went to see the Blessed One. And he then related the entire conversation with the Buddha. And then he asked the Buddha for his opinion. The Buddha responded thus: Pandita Visakha Dhammadinna Bhikkhuni, Mahapanya Visakha Dhammadinna Bhikkhuni. The Buddha responded, the nun Dhammadinna is a scholar. Visakha, she has great wisdom. The translation, which I copied from the net, translate this as astute, that is reference to Pandita. But you need to sort of recall Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, for instance, who was regarded as a scholar. So I have some concerns about translations because they are also really not very much in part of good speech, to be honest, because they don't actually reflect what has been clearly said and done by the Buddha and his followers in the various translations that take place. Then we go into the next very interesting line. If you came to me and asked this question, I would answer it exactly the same way as the nun Dhammadinna. If you came to me and asked this question, I would answer it exactly the same way as the nun Dhammadinna. I don't think there has been any spiritual texts emanating from that period where there is a clear, tacit understanding of the equity of women in the world. The Buddha also urged individuals, and this really very much is training in elocution or training in speech, how to address an audience. Monks, a talk is wrongly addressed when, having weighed one type of a person against another, it is addressed to these 5 inappropriate types of persons. This is a lesson in how to make a speech. What 5? A talk on faith is wrongly addressed to one devoid of faith. A talk on virtuous behavior is wrongly addressed to an immoral person. A talk on learning is wrongly addressed to one of little learning. A talk on generosity is wrongly addressed to a miser. A talk on wisdom is wrongly addressed to an unwise person. This is what is normally learned in drama schools today. I'm now pointing your attention to how best to reprove another. This is relevant for human resources. I personally think that if they take Venerable Sariputta's advice on how to reprove individuals, we will have less strikes, less stress, less confrontation, particularly within companies the world over. So Venerable Sariputta addresses the bhikkhus about, actually provides them with human resource training. Friends, a bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another should first establish 5 things in himself. What 5? He should consider, I will speak at a proper time, not at an improper time. I will speak truthfully, not falsely. I will speak gently, not harshly. I will speak in a beneficial way, not in a harmful way. I will speak with a mind of loving kindness, not while harboring hatred. A bhikkhu who wishes to reprove another should first establish these 5 things in himself. I think this is really relevant for all the human resources personnel across the world. We then now go to, finally, I will be wrapping up shortly, but I would like to conclude by drawing your attention to the Buddha's meiotic method, a way of eliciting knowledge in the mind of a person by interrogation and insistence on close and logical reason. This particular set of concerns and highlighting the Buddha's forms of speech actually was provided to me by Dr. Ananda Guruge, who was Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Sri Lanka to UNESCO, when I used to meet him from time to time in Paris, when I used to attend meetings at UNESCO on the Man and Biosphere program. And this is in his really interesting book, Buddhist Answers to Current Issues, page 145. The word meiotic comes from the Greek word meiotikos, which means or pertains to midwifery, serving as a midwife. And this is a method that was used by Socrates in his discourses and debates. When faced with innuendo and threats, the Buddha did not run away. He stood up to them, and he dealt directly with fake speech about him and the Sangha. And he was fearless when it came to dealing with these things directly with kings, as we have seen, and with senior officials in his day. He did not sit in a corner in some cave or in some temple and meditated and let the world go by. So this is a very interesting example where the Buddha was challenged by the son of Nigantanathaputta, Satchaka, who vowed to his followers that he would defeat the Buddha in a debate. Listen to this statement. So in debate, I will shake the recluse Gautama down and shake him up and pump him about. Shake him up and pump him about. So Satchaka goes to the Buddha and says, Master Gautama, I assert thus: material form is myself, feeling is myself, perception is myself, formations are myself, consciousness is myself. And then he says, so does this great multitude. This is very much what you hear from politicians today. I say this, and the people, without necessarily saying how many people, a process of speech which prime ministers, presidents use today. So the Buddha then counters by saying, what has this great multitude to do with you? Ajivesana, that was his name for Satchaka. What has this great multitude got to do with you? Please confine yourself to your own assertions alone. Then the Buddha then presses further. When Satchaka says material form is myself, the Buddha says, would a head-appointed, anointed, noble king, for example, exercise the power within his own realm to execute those who should be executed? Then Satchaka answers in the affirmative. Would a head-appointed noble king, for example, have the power to exercise people in the realm? Then the Buddha says, what do you think, Ajivesana, when you say thus, material form is myself? Do you exercise any such power over that material form as to say, let my material form be thus, let my material form not be thus? And then the young man, Satchaka, was silent, and he realized what was going on. And he began to then unravel his own assertions. But he had the grace to then also admit the fact that he was wrong. So he responded to the Buddha. He said, it is wonderful, Master Gautama. It is marvelous now how when Master Gautama is spoken to offensively again and again, assailed by discourteous courses of speech, he then spoken to offensively again and again, assailed by discourteous courses of speech, the color of his skin brightens and the color of his face clears, as it is to be expected of one who is accomplished and fully enlightened. So, what is the relevance of the teachings of the Buddha today? This is where we see a dynamic and a vibrant Buddha. And the teachings of the Buddha, which are relevant to the world today. Social media carries opportunities and challenges. Today, social media has imploded the impact of fake speech. Fake speech is an existential threat to daily living, well-being, governance, and democracy. But Buddhist communities need to pay attention urgently to these critical challenges. And I would like to put it to you that the Buddha's discourses are relevant, vital, and critical for enabling us to move us towards a sustainable world. I thank you so much.